Good afternoon and welcome to the second module for the CCI Clearance Preparedness Program. The next module will be on March 11th from noon to 1. You all have received calendar invites and you'll receive 3 reminders prior to the module. I know there was a little bit of confusion in the initial module about if your name is being shown. I am going to send you all on how to make sure that your name is being displayed properly. It's how to change your display name on Zoom. Please do not message in the chat if I can see your name, if you do have any questions regarding your attendance, please reach out to me after. I want to make sure that you guys are all paying attention during the module. Do not worry about your first and last name. But again, I will send you how to make sure, maybe for future ones, that your first and last name is being shown for attendance purposes. As mentioned, as always, please reach out to me if you have any questions regarding any module logistics or attendance. I will now turn this over to Tim to introduce himself and to get started on today's module.
Okay, good afternoon. Hope everyone's doing well. Kendall, could I get a sharing is not turned on? Can you turn it on?
You are all set?
Awesome. Thank you so much. Let's go with that one. See if that works. Can everyone see the slides?
Yes, you're good to go.
All right, beautiful. All right, so this is going to be a little guidance. My name's Tim Leake. I'm the Associate Director for Security Management Operations here at Virginia Tech, and I fall under the Office of Export Control Research Compliance. And let me see if I can get this to move forward. There we go. So here's our little Parthenon for the Office of Export Secure Research Compliance, and it has 3 major pillars: export control sanctions, research security, which is a new and budding area that we're needing to go down that road for the United States government. But the last pillar is industrial security, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So those of you who want to work in classified research, we need to go through the clearance process. And that's the historicals of this started way back with the executive orders starting in 1940. And as you can see, the additional executive orders that have come out through the years as amended by each president. And then eventually it established the National Industrial Security Program, which is a way that codifies how we're supposed to go through the system of classifying, safeguarding, and declassifying national security information. Now, in 2001, the NISPOM was actually codified. The NISPOM is the National Industrial Security Program Operating Manual. It's a lot of words to say this is how we control classified information and how we get people to be cleared in order to be able to access, work with classified information for their programs to support government operations. So you'll see that it's been codified to the Code of Federal Regulations 32 CFR Part 117. That's specifically the NISPOM. And it incorporates a new piece of reporting requirements called the SEAD 3, or the Security Executive Agent Directive 3. Very well defined on how we're supposed to ensure that our clearance stays in good standing. There's certain things in life that happens when we have to report things that could affect our clearance if we have one, or the process of getting a clearance if we're looking to do that in the future. They also put out another industrial security letter to define some more clarify some issues and provide guidance on reportable activities. So this is good, the basics. This is about the most basic slide you can have, and it's one of my most favorite. I've been doing this for about 15 years, and the idea is the clearance, we go through that process. It's administrative action. It does a background check on everyone and sees if you are eligible to receive a clearance. The second part of that is you can't just go to the government and say, I'd like to have a security clearance. You have to have a requirement or a need to know. And the need to know comes from a government contract. It's issued. You get once the contract is issued and given to, say, Virginia Tech, um, it will also have a DD 254 that authorizes Virginia Tech and a place of performance in order to be able to work in that classified environment. And so you can't just get a classified program and then work it in an unclassified space, or there has to be, built to ICD 705 standards as a facility that allows you to access classified information. So that need to know is pretty important. You can't just ask for it. But once you get the clearance and the need to know with all the paperwork and documentation in place to work, then you can get access to that information. So classification and marking, this is the very basic. It's been around since 1949. There's 3 different levels of classification of government materials, and it's all based on how much damage it can cause to the United States government and national security if it is compromised. So the first one is confidential. That's the lowest level. It can cause damage. Secret, it can cause serious damage. And then when they classify information at top secret, it can cause exceptionally grave damage to national security. So as you go through the process, you get, the idea that, you get a program manager or a PI that says, hey, I want you to work on one of my programs. There's, depending on the contract and the program itself, it comes through in certain tiers. Tier 1 is very low risk, non-sensitive. It uses the SF-85 form. Tier 2 is, you'll hear it as a public trust. That's the next level. Some people say that's even harder to get than a class to get through the classification process to get a clearance sometimes for a public trust, but that uses the SF-85P. Now, once you get into a classified program that requires a clearance, if it's a secret program, then we'll submit you under a tier 3, and that uses the SF-86 form. And that's what we're really going to talk about today. That's the most important part of the process for you as you go into this. It's going to require some in-depth, some of it is pretty academic, your name, social, that kind of thing. But then it starts getting into, where you lived, people we'll talk about that in a different slide. So the tier 3 is not as detailed. And then there's the tier 4 is the high level public trust. But then the tier 5, if you need a top secret clearance, you'll have to submit a SF-86 form at the tier 5 level. Okay, so initial clearance application, the standard form SF-86. You can, copy this down. You can Google the SF-86, and I recommend that you do if you're planning on doing this, because it does require some homework. You have to go back 7 to 10 years into your past to be able to fill out this form correctly. And since it's a government form, you have to fill it out to the best of your ability. It'll ask about, again, places you lived, which sometimes for a student is difficult because you go home, you start the house, you come to school, then you go back, and then back and forth. So you have to list all those places and information and people who knew you while you were there. It's a good amount of research that you have to do in order to make sure that is, filled out to the absolute best of your ability. And depending on the agency that sponsors your clearance, there's certain versions of that form that you may have to fill out. Some will be in hard copy, some will be digitally through the EAP system. I hope that's the one you get, because the EAP system does maintain and hold that. So when I talk about continuous evaluation through continuous vetting in a slide a little farther down, you will be able to understand why that would be advantageous to you if it keeps the last 5 to 7 years in there. All you have to do is update it. So you'll see I said something about the EAP. That is a new process that came online maybe about 3 years ago through the NBIS system, or the National Background Investigation System. And that's what you should receive if you're coming through Virginia Tech to complete either a tier 3 or a tier 5 SF-86 for clearance processes. There is a guide Again, you can Google this. You can copy that down if you'd like. It's a pretty good guide to kind of lay out what you can expect as far as the information that's going to be required to be put into this form. Again, it's a lot of detail. And I will caveat that if you're a young student and you're 22 years old, you only got to go back to 18. So you only have to actually go back about 4 years. But if you're 30, you got to go back 10 years on a T5, 7 on a T3. So here are the sections. And the first 2 lines here, you'll see that it's pretty academic. Name, birth, place of birth, date of birth, Social Security, any other identifying information. That's pretty easy. But when you get down to this level here, where you've lived, it's going to start from when you're 18, and there can't be any breaks. There can't be any months that are not accounted for. And it's difficult to do sometimes. Where you went to school, you'll have to go back to probably high school. That's about all you really need to do. But then your employment activities, if you've had a summer job and then you come to school and then you had a work job, you had a job while you're at school and then you go back home, you do another summer job. You're going to have to get all those names of your supervisors and the time periods you work for them. And again, there's no spaces in there. If you were unemployed during a month, saying, you come back to school in August and then you get another job in September, not until October, September, you have to mark down as unemployed. So there can't be any breaks in that time period going back how far you have to go back. Military history, so the people you know well. This is an important one. This is 3 people who know you well. It's because after you complete and you finish and submit this, there's going to be an investigator who's going to get your SF-86. They will contact you. They will walk through all this to make sure it's as accurate as possible. If there's anything missing, you didn't check a box, something of that nature. But then they'll contact those people who know you well as character verification references. So those are people that you want them to have a good opinion of you. Obviously, you can't be putting foreign nationals as people who know you well, because putting in for this, you have to be a U.S. citizen. And then the rest of them, as you go down through, it all bases off the 13 adjudicative guidelines. And I'll talk about the whole person concept as we go through this. So I saw there's a couple. Hey, Kendall, can you read me any of those questions in the chat? I can't really see them.
Sure. We had someone say you only need to go back until age of 18. Apologies if they've missed any additional context.
Yeah, no, it's that's the age of adult. We don't ask you to go back to birth and other things of that nature. So 18 is you go back to that. Does that make sense, or is there any other questions added on to that? That is the age of adulthood, and they really can't ask you anything before that. Last week, the only trouble I had was their authentication process. Yeah, that's once we send you the link, you have to go in, and a lot of times you do have to call the number to get through. The process for the OKTA is fairly difficult. Actually, it's easy once you get through. You just got to call them. Okay.
It looks like we had one more question just jump in. So we just need to list everything after age 18, not for however many years back.
Correct. Okay. So the clearance application steps. So we've kind of talked around it a little bit. This puts it into a direct kind of a line, and I'll talk to each one of these. So first, you need that program need. You need the contract. And you need to be an employee of the company that holds that contract. The sponsoring government agency will provide the contract and the DD-254, which authorizes that company to be able to conduct classified research. Sometimes you get it to where The classified research can only be done at the sponsor site, which means that you'd have to travel to the sponsor site in order to be able to work that program. Um, Other places, if they have an approved accredited space facility, they will issue that DD-254 and say that this, Virginia Tech has a facility that can operate at this level, and you're authorized to conduct that program there, so you don't have to travel. And then they'll start, the next bullet is personnel clearance required at levels determined by program needs. So if it's a TS program, you'll have to be submitted for a TS clearance. If it's a secret program, you'll have to get put in for a T3 for a secret clearance. And those will be defined by the PI and the PM of the company that either you're working for that has that contract. They'll select individuals to complete the SF-86 and then submit to the agency. And that'll be done through the company's security office. Folks like me will contact you. We'll send you a release of information, which is a form that allows us to be able to gather your personal information, your PII, your personally identifiable information. And we're required to protect that at the highest levels. We'll go through that process. We'll send you the release of information and then a pre-screen questionnaire. We have a requirement to review to make sure that we're not submitting, we're wasting government dollars. We have to be able to say that this is not a convicted felon, which is an automatic outlier that says you can't be submitted for a clearance. There's other things, but we do that pre-screen just to make sure that we're going down the right road. And then we will submit you the e-app where you go in, you fill out your SF-86. You get the way it works is you have to log in, and within the first 10 days, you have to log in, make some change to it and save it. And then that changes it to a 45-day window for you to complete it. However, I'll tell you, it's a total of 90 days. So it's 45 to get it back submitted to the government. And then you're giving the government 45 days to finish their process to get it submitted to the adjudicators, which I'll talk about in the next slide. So I guess the point I want to make sure you guys understand, it's best if you think you're going to be submitted for a clearance, go ahead, download the SF-86, go through each section and fill it, get the information that you need so that when the e-app arrives, you can log in and you can complete it in 10 to 14 days is probably the best you can do, and then resubmit it back to us. Because the other thing we're going to have to do is we're going to have to get you set up for fingerprints. Sometimes that's easy, sometimes it's not. It's digital. If you're here in Blacksburg, it's pretty easy. We have a facility right around the corner we have a contract with. You can go in within 3 or 4 days and get it done. If you're in Arlington, we may have to send you to what is the other A word up there? Annapolis, I think, is the closest place to there. So that's a fairly good hike. So we have to schedule it, make sure you can get there on time and be able to do that process. Send it back to us. They send it back to us. We marry it up and we submit it. That starts the clock on the government on how long it takes. Now they're gonna do the background investigation. They'll come in combination with the SF-86 reviews. And I talked about the interviews, the people who know you well. They'll call your former employers to verify that, yep, you did work for them. Just validating all the information on the SF-86 and the names and the personnel and the people that you put on there as far as landlords, people who knew you, where you lived, that type of thing. So once they go through that process of a review and interviews, the investigation closes and they send it to an adjudicator. And this is where I talked about the whole person concept. The adjudicator reviews any issues that might have in any of those areas of the 13 adjudicative guidelines, which I'll show you here in a second. And then they will determine eligibility. And the eligibility is whether you're approved for a clearance or you're rejected for a clearance.
So, we have a bit of questions. Do you want me to jump in with some questions?
Sure. Let's get them as we go.
Okay, it says, how about foreign employers? If someone lived and worked in a foreign country?
Yeah, I mean, that's not uncommon. It happens. And that's where the adjudicator comes in. Depending on your relation under seed 3, which is the reporting requirements. And as you go through the sections of the SF-86, you'll see that the 13 adjudicative guidelines are closely linked and related to each section that's in the SF-86. So if you had a foreign employer, you would list it in the time period and that you worked at it. And if you worked in a foreign country, and they will go through that process to determine how close and continuing is that relationship with that foreign national. That's one of the things, foreign travel, foreign nationals. And we'll talk a little bit about social media. That's another one that has gained traction over the past 5 years, where if you're on a gaming system and your opponents that you meet with weekly are foreign nationals, and you have some affiliation or endearment with that foreign national, that'd be something that they'll have to be adjudicated.
We got another one here. Are individuals that have been convicted of a felony automatically disqualified? What if their conviction has been sealed?
Again, that's an adjudicator issue. What they will do is they will look at it. We will review it. If it's still standing and there's no, that hasn't been sealed, there hasn't been some other things, we'll have to make a determination at our level to make sure that when we submit this, it's not waste, fraud, and abuse of government dollars. So if a conviction's been sealed because it was probably before you were 18, that's normally the piece of it. You'll still have to report that because it is a conviction. Even though it's before 18, there's certain things that we would have to put in. Okay. Did that answer your question as far as is it automatically disqualifying? It is one that has to require some significant additional adjudication. I'll leave it at that.
We have another one. What about international students in the US if they want to work in the US during their opt or other process, OPT or other
Yes,
process?
if you're an international student and you are a foreign national and you're not a U.S. citizen, you cannot work on classified programs or CUI, controlled unclassified information programs. Basically, any restricted programs, you are not authorized to be able to work on those programs.
And what if you were prior military who got out in 2018?
Okay,
I'm not sure what that is in reference to, but
if you have to expand that a little bit more. I
okay.
will tell you, go ahead.
I was just going to say, in the meantime, maybe if they want to share a little bit more detail on that. We have another one that says, where can I find the SF-86? If it's somebody's first time applying, maybe they just kind of want to see what it looks like and check it out.
Yeah, that's why I said earlier that you can Google SF-86 and the form will come up. You can Google the SF-86 guide, how to fill it out. That will come up as well. You can, and that I highly recommend you do that. Download it, go through each of the sections so you can see what the questions are and how hard and difficult it's going to be to remember. If it's 10 years ago, I can't remember what I had for dinner last night. So it's going to take a little bit of effort to do some mining and get the actual addresses of where you lived and someone there that knows you well, and contact information for them. Those things are difficult. But I will also tell you that anyone you list on your SF-86 as a reference or a landlord who knew you well, call them or send them an email saying, hey, I'm submitting for a clearance and I put your name down as a reference. So you may be called by an investigator from the United States government, and I'm not in trouble. I'm not going to get arrested. There was a story where a guy lived in Nebraska and his grandparents lived out on a farm. So the investigator drove up onto the farm, and his two grandparents were thinking that their son was being arrested or their grandson was being arrested. So make sure the people that you list on the SF-86 know that you submitted them as part of your reference package for clearance.
I think we got some more information here about the 2018 question. I think this is more of a question about, say that you've left the military or prior military and you had a clearance, but now it's inactive because, you no longer are with the military. And that kind of goes with for other individuals that might have had a job that had a clearance and maybe it's now inactive. And is it an easy process to get back your clearance or maybe touch on
It's a
that?
very good question. It's a very good question. So that's why we send out the pre-screen with the release of information and ask you to fill that out. The first thing it does, it gives us the ability to get your social security number, and then we can go into the government systems of record. And if you're in this, which is one of the government systems of record that we use, your profile will come up. And if it's still in scope, and you had a secret clearance and we're going to put you on a secret program, then that streamlines the process very quickly. You don't have to go through the SF-86 again process because you've already been reviewed, adjudicated, and you have an eligibility at a certain level. So that's the importance of the pre-screen, is that we can get that out of the way. I also want to put out right now, if you have any questions specifically of that nature, and hey, you can send it to smo@vt.edu. It'll be on the last slide that we talked about. And you can submit that question. That'll come into my office. I've got several, assistant facility security officers who've got good years of experience, and they'll be able to answer your questions if I don't do it personally. But yeah, very good question. And yes, if you're still in scope, we can bring you right on in docu and get you started rather rapidly.
Do you want to tackle some other questions or do you want
Sure.
to
Let's
maybe?
roll while we got them.
Okay, great. I
We're
just don't
about
want
the
you
30
to
minute
miss
mark.
out on
So
anything. So given that the security clearance process can be lengthy for a first-time applicant, what is the standard timeline for transitioning into the role? Do most candidates remain in their current job until the full clearance is adjudicated, or is there a specific milestone, such as interim clearance or a first time or a firm start date, where you recommend giving notice? And then just to maybe you can snowball into it, how much of the SF-86 is on your polygraph? Is the polygraph just a verification of your SF-86 or is it additional testing questions?
wow. Okay, that one kind of runs the gambit. That is a wide swath, but I'll try and answer it as succinctly as possible. Okay, so there's secret, TS, and then there is the sensitive compartmented information, SCI programs that require additional things, and sometimes they require a polygraph. So I will tell you from the get-go, the SF-86 is your base document. That is the one you're going to put effort and sweat and blood into, making sure it's as accurate as possible. For that main reason that it's going to be looked at by an investigator. It's going to be looked at by an adjudicator. Bad news doesn't get better with time. My mom always used to tell me. So make sure you list the things on there. List your foreign contacts that you have so they can be adjudicated on the front end. To follow on with the polygraph question, if you do you need to have a T5 top secret clearance in order to be able to gain a SCI eligibility, where the adjudicator looks in and they do a more in-depth process of reviewing your history. If you do require a polygraph, the SF-86 is absolutely your most important document. I tell folks all the time, if you have to go in for a polygraph because your program requires it, because you need access to a high side network that's owned by that agency, that sponsoring agency is going to make sure to the best of their ability that you are who you say you are, that you are of upstanding character, and you can keep a secret. So the whole person concept starts with your SF-86, your background investigation. If it rolls through to a polygraph, that is that whole person concept where they're going to look at things. Now, if you say you're 40 years old and you got arrested for some alcohol related incident while you were a graduate student in college, They're going to look at time. Time is the best adjudicator you have. Now you're 40 years old, you're married, you have a couple kids, you have a job. Are you in the same dynamic that you were when you were a graduate student and you had that alcohol related incident? Probably not. So that forms into the adjudicator's, whole person package. So each individual and each person's security clearance is their process. There are certain things that, they come out every year and say, well, for a secret clearance T3, I've heard people say that if you haven't killed anyone and you're still a pretty good, in pretty good standing everywhere else, you could probably get a clearance if you have a pulse. That may not be exactly accurate, but secrets are not that hard to get. They only dig so far. If you, when you submit the T3 and even the T5, they'll go through a certain point. If they don't see anything that is of concern, they may issue an interim clearance. The interim clearance does a couple things for you. It allows you to begin work on the program, but you can't work on any programs that require ComSec, NATO, and maybe one other defining thing that will keep you from, once you have a full up secret or TS, that you won't have those restrictions any longer. But your process will still continue, but we can indock you at least at that level. So they give out timelines. Normally, T3s take shorter time periods, anywhere from 3 to 6 months, in order to be able to get it fully up and running. And that's from the start. That's when you start your SF-86. The sooner you get your SF-86 done, the sooner we submit it, the sooner they're going to do the investigation and adjudication, the sooner you're going to get your clearance. T5s take a little longer. They're anywhere between 6 months and 9 months on the average. And I said before, each clearance process is an individual's clearance process. Sometimes they take longer, sometimes they take smaller, depending on what you've had to list in your SF-86 and what needs to be adjudicated. Did I kind of, I think I got most of that. Is there any other questions on that part?
I don't think so. I think this is mostly about the SF-86, again, where it says if you have just become a US citizen, how many months would you have to wait to be eligible to fill one out?
If you've raised your hand and you have your documentation that says you are a United States citizen, you're ready to go. You'll have to submit that as part of your package, but there's nothing that will, you don't have to wait any time longer. So if you're a dual citizen, sometimes that becomes an issue. The big thing they're talking, one of the things in the 13 adjudicative guidelines, which I can throw up here. There you go. The first adjudicative guideline is allegiance to the United States, unquestionable allegiance to the United States. So if you're a dual citizen, the question is, who are you more allegiant to, the United States or to the other country that you have a citizenship with? For the 13 adjudicative guidelines here, you'll go down the list and you'll see a lot of this stuff. They look at personal conduct, they look at alcohol consumption, drug involvement, psychological, criminal. You'll see on there is judgment, questionable judgment, lack of judgment. You can go through these, you can see. So what they're doing is they're making sure, and it's protecting the individual as well as the government. When you talk about foreign intelligence service agents, they look for weaknesses. They look for things that people want to not get out into the public. If you have something that you are so concerned of your mama finding out about, that you'd be willing to not be truthful in a certain manner, that is a concern. If you don't care who knows, most of these things become a non-factor, because there's no one, the foreign intelligence service agents or any other country's agents, they can't get any leverage on you. So this is what they're looking at. They're making sure that there's nothing in your history, in your past, that you'd be willing to break the rules in order to be able to make sure that that type of information on you doesn't get out somewhere. So it's to protect you, but it also protects the government and the information that you're going to be exposed to. Okay. Do we have more questions?
We do.
Okay.
Yeah, they're coming in. If you get a public trust, would it be easier to get a secret clearance?
Two separate processes. If you have a public trust, that's something that you would put into your SF-86 in the section where it talks about previous clearances. Where is it? There's a section in there that talks about have you been previously cleared, and I'm trying to find which one it is. But if you go through the SF-86, you'll see that, and you'll put that information in there. Is it helpful? Probably. That means someone has done an investigation, but absolutely, does it help you in the T3, tier 5? I've never, investigated. There's never been an investigator. What I do is I gather all the information and I submit it to them, and they do their process. But I would say it won't hurt for sure.
And then we have, can the SF-86 be used against you if you declare, let's say, streaming media? Will it only be preserved in the investigation?
Uh, yeah, yes and no. I mean, if you put in there that you've killed somebody and you've admitted guilt to something, potentially is that yes, you will get visited by the local law enforcement. So if you put in something that you were illegally downloading software and making money off of it, it's an admission of guilt. Well, you wrote it and you signed it and you dated it. So yes, potentially it could have additional issues. I do know for a fact on the polygraph that people have gone in and admitted to some horrendous things. They stop the poly and they call the local police force, and they are escorted out of the building. So to answer your question, yes, if you are doing something illegal, potentially, yes, it could come back on you. Next question.
Great. I know we spoke briefly about breaks in work, but would long breaks in work, like 2 or more years, cause us to be rejected?
Won't cause you to be rejected. If you were cleared at one time, or are you just talking about work and you didn't, no, you would put down in your SF-86 that you were unemployed for those 2 years. That's not a discriminator, that you had the opportunity to not have to work. So I guess the initial path I was going down is if you were cleared and you left that company and you went to another company for 2 years, and then they decided, hey, we want you to have a clearance, and it's been over a year. There are certain things that we may have to do in order to be able to get your clearance back. If it's over 2 years, we have to go through the initial process over again.
And then what is it meant by use of info tech systems? How does this relate to cybersecurity?
Okay. Information technical systems. When you read that section, and I just pulled this up here, the use of social media and background checks. Information technology nowadays, it's everywhere. And there's, cyber awareness, cyber technologies. If you have your phone. I made a joke about 5 years ago when Alexa was big, and I was like, I'll never have an Alexa in my house. And a good friend of mine is an IT guy. He's like, it's already there. You have a cell phone sitting next to you. Yeah, they're already listening to you. They already have, and they're gathering data and information. Everything we touch digitally leaves a footprint. So cyber security is our method of trying to be able to protect ourselves from that type of intrusion as best you can. That's where you set your privacy settings on all your social media accounts on your phone. Set your privacy settings to the most restrictive you can. That's my recommendation to ensure that you don't add up any identity theft, or they're not capturing all the data, because they're going to get some. Does that answer your question as far as the difference between cybersecurity and IT tech systems?
I hope so. I'm not seeing them come in just yet, but I'm gonna answer yes. It did answer the question. I'm gonna ask two more questions, and then we're gonna take a pause on questions and let Tim finish up his presentation, and we can see if there's time at the end because I want to be cognizant of everybody's time here today.
And okay,
Um,
Kendall, real quick,
sure.
just make sure I want folks to know, write your questions down, and if we can't get to them in the hour, send them to smo@vt.edu, and we will answer your individual questions based off of your specific scenarios to the best of our ability.
Great. That's awesome. Thank you for that help.
Mhm.
So two more questions here. How do you report manage living with a foreign national, specifically Russian? Is there any additional information to be prepared to provide?
Yes, yeah. There's when you read through the seed three, that's I recommend Google that as well. There's a specific section that talks about roommates. There's a if there's a non-romantic relationship and you're just roommates together, then you report certain things. If it's a romantic relationship with a foreign national, you'd have to put some additional things. Very specific. The seed three breaks that down as far as relationships with foreign nationals and where does it fill in. Now, the key thing is you're the person who determines whether it's a close and or continuing relationship with a foreign national based off of how they define it. Then you would say, yep, this person I grew up with is foreign national. He's been a friend since I was a kid. I talked to him a couple times, on social media, every month, every year. I sent him a Christmas card. I know all his kids. You'll be able to determine how close and continuing that relationship is with a foreign national. That doesn't mean you have to break off contact with them. You just have to report it. And if that individual through the investigation and adjudication process, you've reported it, you have a relationship with them, but it doesn't mean that you can't work in this area or get a clearance, but you have to report it.
And then last one before we jump back into the presentation. What
Mhm.
type of financial issues are going to be disqualifying? I know a lot of college students tend to not be the most financially responsible. How is this taken into consideration? It's a
uh,
good question.
it is. It is a good question. Severe indebtedness. When you read, there's a website called CDSE, and they do case studies on individuals that have, had a clearance, broken the rules, and got investigated and then charged. And a lot of them come back with the fact is they were financially in despair. I don't know what would cause somebody to take $25,000 and risk, their career, um, their person, and all the things for $25,000 when you think you can get a job and you could probably make 50 in a year. But there are people that do that. So it's really a case by case basis. If you've had a lot of what do they call it when they garnish your wages, and you've shown a severe lack of financial capability to manage money, that would put you in a scenario where someone could use that leverage to say, "Hey, I can get you $10,000, and all your problems go away." And they have to actually think about, well, that might be an option. Well, that becomes a problem. So, as far as indebtedness, it's again an individual level. But certain things, if there's significant garnishments, and you've been fired from a couple jobs, if you have some individuals that are like, yeah, no, he hasn't paid his rent in 6 months, those will become issues, and sometimes they are you can't get over the hurdle based off of the whole person. Again, back to the adjudicative guidelines, that whole person thing. If there's a bunch of different things, any single one is not going to eliminate your ability to get cleared. But additions of those and bad judgment and that type of thing, lack of responsibility, those start to add up. So again, it's the individual, it's the whole person concept, and how many adjudicative issues you have that could come back and say, yeah, no, we're not going to extend the ability for you to have a clearance and see classified information. I hope that answers that question. Okay, that was the second question, Kendall. So I'll jump back in real quick. I've got about 14 minutes.
Great.
And I only got a couple more slides, so we should have time at the end to do more questions. This is important. This is, again, the last 5 years or so, it's gained traction. Social media. You'll find that they're going to start, going through people's social media accounts, websites, any web-based tool. They collect, publicly available information. And it's best, like I said, to report things before they find it and you hadn't reported it in your SF-86. Go back to the adjudicative guidelines. Again, these are important. They define every section of the SF-86. So as you go through your SF-86, you can go to the adjudicative guidelines and see what it says in relation to any issue you might have that you're concerned about. Okay, so continuous vetting through continuous evaluation. When we indoc an individual either into a secret TS or SCI, you're signing forms saying that you're going to report certain things that happen in your life. Back in, I want to say 2001 time period, the SF-86, the T3, T5s, it used to be that for a T3, you would get it, it would be valid for 10 years. And at the 10-year mark, you'd have to do a periodic review where you would fill out another SF-86, you submit it, they would do another investigation, just like you had on an initial. For a TS or a Tier 5 investigation, it was good for 5 years. And at the 5-year mark, you would have to do another SF-86. They would start an investigation just as it was an initial, and they would go through that process again. You'd stay in access. If they found any issues, then they would come back and they would have to negotiate and adjudicate those issues. It became too much for doing initials and periodic reviews to where they were backed up over a year on people submitting their periodic review and not getting it to an investigator and through an adjudicator for a long period of time. So they came up with this idea of continuous vetting and continuous evaluation. Now, everyone across the board, Tier 3, Tier 5, every 5 years, you will update and submit an SF-86 that's updating the last 5 years. What's going on in the background is the continuous vetting. They have access to all different kinds of public websites for criminal, judicial, medical, and they run your profile through that. And if something pops up during that time period while they're running that continuous vetting, they will contact you and say, hey, we found this in this public website for, say, judicial. You went in for, you had an argument with your rental, your landlord, and you went to court and you were found, exonerated, and they dismissed the case. The problem is that you're on the judicial website. So that is a reportable event that you went to court, and however it works out, whether you were found guilty or innocent, that really doesn't matter. The fact is that you had a reportable event, you need to report it. So the continuous vetting process is happening continually. Your CE, your continuous evaluation, now is when you submit your CE, your SF-86 for your continuous evaluation, they will submit it into the system and update your date within 2 to 3 days of submitting the updated CE SF-86. But the continuous evaluation continues all the time. Okay, I think I covered that one pretty good. So how it works. So the CV process, they have these automated database checks, terrorism, foreign travel, financial activity, criminal activity, credit records, public records, eligibility. On the credit, you may have it frozen. And in the past, you can freeze your credit report. That's not a bad thing to do. But in order to be able to start a SF-86 process, they need to get access to your credit report. Well, and you'd have to put it into a thaw status, and then they'd be able to access it, and then they'd come out, and then as soon as it was out of thaw, you could put it back to freeze your credit report again. They don't require that anymore. They can get to your credit report in a frozen state. So they're going to go through all these databases. They find something, alerts, they're verified. You have the opportunity to take action or to respond saying, oh man, I forgot to report that. Well, they're going to want to hear it and then how it happened. And then remember, they would much rather go in and see any of these, alerts, and then they go to your rec and they go, oh, they reported it. Good to go. All right. So follow in. And if it's an issue, they'll adjudicate right on the spot. So what this has done is, number one, it's decreased the time it requires someone to get a initial clearance. Secondly, it decreases the time of remaining in access and decreases the amount of money and the number of investigations that's required by the government. So all around, it's a very good thing. So if you look at the bottom part here, they find something and they go to your record, everything's great, no action required, or they go through and they mitigate it and it goes back up here and it continues to monitor. If they find something they have to take action for that you reported, that is, and then it is adjudicated and found to be, now we don't think that they should have access to classified information any longer than your clearance would be revoked. All right, so I think we made it to the end. That's the last slide. I've said it a bunch of times, smo@vt.edu. We're more than happy to get into a conversation with you, to ease your nerves, answer your questions, be able to help you, get through any concerns you may have. So with that, Kendall, do we have more questions in the chat?
We do. We have two more.
Okay.
As of right now, when you say only publicly available websites will be checked, so any content set to private won't be factored in?
Repeat that question again. There are public websites. There are, government websites that they have access to, other government systems of record that they have access to.
I'm assuming they're maybe meaning Facebook and Instagram. That attendee might have to be more specific, but I'm assuming if their Facebook or their Instagram is set to private, would that not be factored in? But they might need to share if that's what that means.
Yes, if it is set and they have privacy settings, which I highly recommend, again, the investigator is going to ask those questions. They'll say, hey, can we have access to your Facebook, your X, your whatever, which ones you've got? They will probably ask for your permission to review it.
Great.
I have a friend that is an investigator, and I can, if he sends me those questions coming to the SMO, I can send those to him, and he will give me a very detailed answer on how that's conducted, and I can get a better answer for you.
Oh, great. Thank you. How are hobbies or how you spend your free time judged?
Depends on what hobbies you're doing during your free time, I guess. Can he expand on that without getting himself feeling like he's in trouble? Because hobbies to me is bowling, golf, woodworking, hiking, those type of things. And if there's nothing illegal in it, I don't see a problem at all. But I guess on a more specific, what is he concerned about? What hobby he's doing?
Should we be preserving past social media communications, and for how long?
I don't think you need to preserve them. If you're putting down your SF-86 that you have some folks that you stay in contact with on social media and they are foreign nationals, that will ask some questions, but I don't think you need to personally preserve it. They're going to, try and do that during the discovery. Sorry about that.
Okay, there might be one more. Oh, do you know if clearances are denied solely on the individual having bad credit?
No, again, it's the whole person concept. I tell folks, once you get cleared and you get in-docked, we have what we call an insider threat protection program. So an insider is anybody that has access to information. An insider threat is someone that would use um, that information for nefarious purposes. And we have to kind of keep an eye on individuals. And I tell folks that our insider threat program, when I was little, there was a show on Sunday mornings called Wonderama. And every Sunday on Wonderama, they would set up these enormous, domino, where you line all the dominoes up and a little kid would come out and just tap the domino and it would go down. Then it would get bigger and bigger and bigger. At the end, it was, thousands of dominoes falling down. And it was pretty awesome. That's the way I look at our insider threat program. If if you can stop, and almost every risk mitigation, I was 23 years in the Army, and risk management is a huge thing. If you can stop anywhere in the process before an accident or an incident happens, you could pull a domino out. It would stop the entire reaction, and you'd never get to that crash site. You'd never get to those thousands of dominoes falling. And if you can do that, then you can preserve someone from going down and making bad decisions. You want to get the individual help. Now, if you think about Virginia Tech and almost every industrial company in America, they have an HR or human resources department that if someone's having financial problems, you can get them with a financial advisor and set up a budget and get them back into good standing before they could become a risk that someone would get them and say, hey, $10,000 will fix your problem if you give us this information. So to answer that question solely on the credit, now the whole person concept, if you can get to and say, hey, I've got some credit issues, but I'm working on it. I've got a financial manager. This is the plan. This is my budget. This is how I'm going to get out of this. And you say that to the investigator. Well, okay, he's human. People make mistakes. It's not if, it's when. But he's already identified the problem. He's taking concrete steps to get in a better position to make sure that that's not going to be a problem in the future. Then that is, a mitigating circumstance. So they're going to look at each one of these potential issues that you may be concerned with. And they're also going to look at what mitigating things that are there that we can say, that individual is taking responsibility for it. They're managing it. They're doing it now. There's folks that have problems with alcohol, but they self-report. They say, hey, I'm going to AA meetings. I've been off, I've been on the wagon now for 12 months. Everything's great. So those mitigations and how they approach the problem. But if you're trying to hide that problem, that's where it becomes an issue.
Okay, I'm not seeing any more questions. But I did inform the students, just as you did, to send any other questions to the Security Management Office at smo@vt.edu. I just want to thank you, Tim, so much for your time today. This is so informative. Honestly, I even learned something, and I'm even going through the whole clearance process, so this was incredibly helpful.
Oh,
Thank you so
good.
much for your time. It was great. I hope the students learned something. We had some really great questions today, so thank you so much, students, for honestly sharing all of your questions. They were great. I know they're probably we appreciate your bravery of asking questions. I know some students don't want to ask a question, so we
Yeah,
really
they
appreciate
always
it.
say there's no stupid
Yeah,
questions, but when you
right.
ask a question, three other people beside you are thinking the same thing. So
Exactly. But we will see you all next time. Our next session, as I mentioned, is March 11th. That is going to be the government agency clearance rules and regulations. So we'll dive a little bit deeper into that with Dr. Eric Berger. If you all have any attendance questions or logistics questions for me, you guys know where to find me because I blow up your all's emails all the time. So I'm so sorry about that. But thank you all again for coming. And thank you again, Tim. And we'll see you in March.
More than welcome. Again, smotvt.edu. I'll help you answer any questions you got.
Thank you so much.
All right. Y'all have a great day.
You too.